want to appeal rationally to Russia. This is a great opportunity for the Russian leadership to reevaluate what they're doing, why they are supporting a regime that is committing mass murder against its own people. And so Russia could be part of the solution. Right now, I think everyone in the world sees Russia as part of the problem.
The National Security Advisor, General H.R. McMaster, talking on Fox News Sunday about Russia ahead of Secretary of State Rex Tillerson's trip there. The Russians say that Vladimir Putin will not meet with Secretary Tillerson while he's there. This as Iran, Russia, and Syria put out a statement through the Iranian media in which it says, "We will respond to any aggression powerfully, as Russia and Iran would never allow the U.S. to dominate the world." That's the response put out. This says we're getting more details about just what the U.S. knew about chemical weapons. Take a listen to President Obama and his National Security Advisor, Susan Rice.
Just think about what we've done these last 8 years without firing a shot. We've eliminated Syria's declared chemical weapons program. All of these steps have helped keep us safe and helped keep our troops safe. Those are the result of diplomacy. We don't have strong efforts there, the more you will be called upon to clean up after the failure of diplomacy.
We were able to find a solution that actually removed the chemical weapons that were known from Syria in a way that the use of force would never have accomplished.
Well, there you see President Obama, December 2016, then Susan Rice, just in January 16th this year. In April of 16, the State Department had a report called the Compliance with the Convention on Prohibition of the Development, Production, Stockpiling, and Use of Chemical Weapons, in which it said, this is a State Department report, the United States cannot certify that the Syrian Arab Republic is in compliance with its obligations under this CWC. The United States assesses that Syria did not declare all the elements of its chemical weapons program required by Article 3 of the CWC, and that Syria may retain chemical weapons as defined by the CWC. In addition to assess CW chemical weapons use and maintenance of residual chemical weapons capability, Syria failed to meet most of its milestone destruction dates. Syria was obligated to declare its entire chemical weapons program. The Syrian declaration contained obvious gaps, discrepancies, and omissions, as detailed above, thus placing Syria in non-compliance with the CWC declaration requirements and the additional declaration requirements. Bottom line, what the President and his National Security Advisor were saying was not true. Let's bring in our panel. Charles Hurt, opinion editor for The Washington Times. Leslie Marshall, syndicated talk radio host and syndicated columnist, Charles Krauthammer. Okay, Charles, let's start with U.S. policy to Syria now. And are we figuring out more of what the administration is trying to do?
I don't think the administration itself is sure what it's trying to do. It succeeded in doing one thing, sending a message to the whole world that we're not going to be walked over, we are going to respond, and when we do, it'll be decisive and it'll be quick. The days of hand-wringing and the days of assuming the U.S. will do nothing, no matter how much it's provoked in the Middle East, are over. But as to the specifics of where we go in Syria now, I think what we're getting out of the administration is perhaps unintended strategic ambiguity, meaning everybody in the administration has a particular view and it hasn't been harmonized. I don't think it matters that much, because even if we decided we're going to do regime change, we are not going to marshal the means that would bring it about. We're not going to invade. So that would be sort of a theoretical issue. We get Nikki Haley saying, yes, we got to have regime change. We have the Secretary of State saying, well, we're going to do ISIS first. The fact is we are going to do ISIS first. We are not going to have a policy of active regime change. But we are telling the Russians, Iranians, Hezbollah, and Assad there are limits to what we will tolerate. And that, I think, will help to restrain what looked to be an unassailable and unstoppable winning strategy on the part of Assad. So his future is in limbo now in a way that it hadn't been before. And that's a big achievement.
There is a lot of parsing, Leslie, on what is being said about regime change, but I think it's notable that they're all talking about diplomacy and getting Russia to the table. And possibly that's what the regime change is negotiating, getting Assad out of the seat, and somebody else gets in that Russia can deal with and the U.S. can deal with.
Well, on Sunday, when McMaster's was talking with Chris Wallace here on Fox News, I think he was pretty clear that we want the regime change, but we're not going to be the ones to do it. I really don't see, with all of the actions of Russia, not just with Syria, but even in their own country, bombing a hospital, being complicit in knowing about chemical warfare, and when you hear the statements that Russia and Iran won't stand for this and who they're standing with, and quite frankly, our own Sean Spicer calling them an ally, are they an ally? I don't think Russia is going to play the game the way that we want them to, because the best outcome for them is not necessarily what is the best outcome for the United States. And I don't think Russia cares what the best outcome is for the people of Syria, obviously aligning themselves with Assad.
We should point out the Associated Press has a story out tonight that Russia did know about the chemical weapons attack ahead of time. We haven't been able to back that up with U.S. officials telling us that specifically, but Bob Burns is a great reporter, Charles, of not only the Pentagon but intelligence officials, and that is what they're telling him. I want to play a soundbite from Sean Spicer about the Trump doctrine. That's what he was asked about.
We're going to make sure that our national interests are protected, that we do what we can to make sure that our interests, both economically and national security, are at the forefront, and we're not just going to become the world's policeman running around the country, running around the world, but that we have to have a clear and defined national interest wherever we act.
What do you think of that?
Well, he certainly is right. The president ran on a campaign of not being the world's policeman, and I think that this is, it's pretty important that they keep that in mind, because I think they will start to lose a lot of that support from the people that put them in office if the president forgets that. But given the strike so far, I think they'll get a pass for that. It was obviously an expensive thing, and we don't have a whole lot of money lying around. But the images were shocking enough, and the fact that we responded to the images, well, of course, that's kind of what war is all about, what diplomacy is all about. When you see these images like this, they were shocking, and so we, it makes sense that we would we would react to it. But I do think that it is truly stunning the degree to which the Obama administration failed to understand the gravity of the situation, failed to realize the degree to which they were being lied to, whether it was Susan Rice or John Kerry or the president himself, even after that report that you showed from the State Department. It is truly stunning. After 9/11, we had extensive research and investigations into how we got all that wrong, and I do think it is kind of amazing how badly the Obama administration fumbled this.
Yeah, Barack Obama, who campaigned on intelligence failure about Iraq and chemical weapons and weapons of mass destruction, touting the essentially the finished job of getting weapons of mass destruction and chemical weapons out of Syria.
I find it hard to believe that anybody, any adult in the Obama administration was not aware of the fact that the Syrians are not people you can rely on when they make a promise about weapons of mass destruction or anything else.
Or the Russians, for that matter.
Or the Russians. The Russians are ruthless about this. The Russians lie every day and twice on Sunday. The Russians are denying any involvement in this. Of course the Russians knew about this. The idea that we have to have an investigation is ridiculous. But that's who they are, and the fact that the Obama administration never understood that is a blot on their record.
Next up, a big win for President Trump amid rumors of staff shakeups.
He is very confident in the team that he has, that they have an unbelievable amount of knowledge, and he enjoys the counsel that they all bring to this table. I think there's a lot of stuff that was overblown about this. He understands that we have some pretty smart, talented individuals who are opinionated on a lot of subjects, but that our battles and our policy differences need to be behind closed doors.
Sometimes this happens in Washington, especially early in an administration where there's a lot of stuff going on. Different people are saying different things about other people inside an administration. But the big thing that happened today was the swearing in of Justice Neil Gorsuch, who in the Rose Garden had the ceremonial swear-in by Justice Kennedy. He clerked for Justice Kennedy. Now he is alongside on the bench. And that is a big promise that President Trump said he was going to do and delivered on today. That said, there is still talk, Leslie, about inner workings and whether Steve Bannon is staying or going, whether Jared Kushner has all the power. What about it?
And even Priebus, I hear his head, maybe on the chopping block. Remember, when McMaster's took the job, he said, my way. It has to be my way. I have to be in control. I decide who the staff's going to be. And the president didn't like that at first, but then he gave in. The guy gets the job. I think clearly when we see in footage and stills that Bannon is not sitting next to the president, he's not at the adult table anymore. He's standing behind the president. I think this makes clear that there is a regime change. And I think that the infighting between Bannon and Jared Kushner was something that the president probably knew. I think this is on the president, quite frankly, because he knew not only these personalities, but the lack of experience in these positions that these people possess. They have experience in other areas, but not in the positions that they have been appointed by the president to hold. And they have different mindsets as to how the president should go and move forward with his idea and his agenda.
Charlie, do you buy this? The inner workings are going to change?
I'm a little skeptical of it, largely because the president, he got here through Steve Bannon whispering politics in his ear. He understands politics largely through the way Bannon, he's kind of been his political Svengali. I don't think that and he realizes the value of a guy like Bannon. And I think the fact that a lot has been made of this meeting between Bannon and Kushner. I think the fact that they were pressed into sitting down together in the first place, more than anything, reveals the strength that Bannon still has in the White House, because if there's a dispute between those two people, why wouldn't you just sort of off with his head? So I think that a lot of people are making a whole lot out of this. These guys got elected because they are disruptive outsiders. Of course, there's going to be disruption, certainly at the beginning and probably for a long time in the White House.
Charles, President Trump, it's fair to say, I think, likes to be liked. He likes that if there's an article that is positive about him, if there's a TV spot that's positive about him. In the wake of this move in Syria, there are a lot of articles that are positive about him. But it is opposite of what Steve Bannon would have advised and did advise.
I think that's absolutely right. I think the strike on Syria was a total contradiction to Bannonism, particularly as expressed in the inaugural address, in which the theme was the world has pushed us around, the world has been living off our generosity and our goodness, and we are not going to take it anymore. We're not going to be the policemen of the world, America first. This is, if anything, a total contradiction of that. This is acting in the name of a humanitarian objective unrelated to our national interest and enforcing an international norm, which is, by definition, what a policeman of the world would do. So in that sense, Bannonism is in decline. I'm sort of intrigued by Leslie's photographic interpretation of his stature. Reminds me of the Kremlinology, where they used to interpret who was up and who was down in the Soviet hierarchy, but by where you stood in relation to the strongman in Russia at the May Day parade. Look, it's clear there are clashes between the two, Kushner and Bannon. There's nothing new in that. What is new is the fact that it is leaked so openly, so gushingly in the press. There have always been these clashes, but we didn't know about them until the memoirs were written. Well, the memoirs are being written today on the pages of the newspaper.
Or in 140 characters or less on Twitter. Yeah. All right, last thing down the row, 10 seconds. Bannon stays or goes?
Stays.
Stays.
Stays. Sorry, I wanted it to be different, but
no. I mean, listen, I'd rather just have answers. Steve Hayes never answers in that seat. That does it for the panel. Stick around for a man and his socks.